Will you marry me? And then shoot me. Man, that guy went through every stage of marriage in like 2 seconds. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of the third episode of Series 12 of Doctor Who, Orphan 55. So this episode, I have to say, it started off really strong and I was really ready to love this episode. I kind of figured that this was going to be more of a filler episode, kind of a stand-in to bridge us into more bigger, exciting episodes later on down the season. I mean, that always kind of happens with the big episode after the series opener. And this episode, Orphan 55, reminded me a lot of the episodes New Earth and Smile. New Earth being David Tennant's, I think, second episode coming off of the Christmas Invasion, his big first episode, and then also Smile, which was the second episode of Series 10 of Peter Capaldi's run with Bill. And they're both kind of structurally very similar, where we go to a new world, new planet, and we're kind of isolated and we're kind of learning about a new culture, but it's fairly insular. With New Earth, it was a hospital. With Smile, it was like this weird, I forget exactly the setup, but it was like this weird off-world planet place that was growing stuff. And we kind of get that here too with this sort of vacation spot that the Doctor and everyone goes to. And like I said, this episode started off really, really, really strong, but as it went along, I didn't really find that I was enjoying myself, and I actually found myself questioning a lot of the stuff that was happening. But let's start off with the positives, and that's all right up front. I like seeing the gang, the fam, hanging out in the TARDIS. We don't get a lot of them just sort of hanging out there and having fun, and I really wish we got to see them just existing in the TARDIS and enjoying that space a little bit more that we got to see in previous Doctor's runs. We haven't gotten as much of that with Jodie's Doctor, and I'm glad that we got a little bit of it here, them just kind of sweeping up and cleaning up the TARDIS, kind of stealing all the hectic stuff going on. And then Graham coming in and just wanting to go on a vacation, and just this sort of conceit of oh, he won a sweepstakes box office sort of thing. It's a bit just a thing to get the plot moving, but it felt kind of interesting and fun and intriguing and built out the world, kind of similar to how Kerblam worked last season, where the box shows up and sort of brings them into this adventure. Works for me in a sort of a strange way, in that it kind of builds out the world and kind of feels just, a bit easy to get into the story, but just a fun way to do it. The whole opening of this episode with them going on vacation, them trying to have some fun, getting to see a little weird and wacky sort of side of the world, was just a lot of fun. Graham talking about Speedos, and Graham just saying I'm gonna go sit for 3 hours there, and then I'm gonna sit 3 hours elsewhere. It was just really, really very funny, felt very in character. Graham is easily my favorite of this entire crew. And then Ryan getting the virus from the computer was just really, really funny, and Jodie's Doctor just sort of coming in and being all right, now suck your thumb and everything, and remember the bats aren't real, and you see Ryan in the background just going, oh my gosh! And I honestly wish we had gotten more of that. And I think that, reflecting on this series and last series, I think one of the things that I feel is a little bit missing from Doctor Who in this sort of era is we're not getting a lot of the moments to just kind of sit and have fun with our characters. In previous iterations, we'd always have just moments where it was just scenes with the characters interacting and having fun with each other. And when we do get that here and there in Jodie's time, I just kind of wish we got a little bit more before plot stuff kind of set off. But maybe that's just me, and maybe that's me looking at previous seasons through rose-colored glasses. It probably was just about the same amount in other series, but that's just sort of me reflecting on it here. So this section where the monsters are attacking the vacation spot before we learn what was actually going on set up an interesting mystery for me, and I really enjoyed that part of it. Why is this vacation spot having people with guns? Why are these monsters attacking, and everyone kind of knows that it's a thing? The staff knows that this is a deal that goes on here. That was an intriguing mystery for me. Didn't really pay off in the end, but it works. But it does start to highlight one of the major problems that I have with this episode, in that I just felt the way that a lot of this was shot, especially with the monsters, felt confusing. Because, for example, we don't really get a lot of times where the monsters and the characters are on screen together. And so we kind of don't really get a sense of where everything is spatially to each other. The monsters just watch the episode again several times, and you'll see that there'll be a shot of the monster, and then there'll be a shot of the characters in that same space, but we don't get a sense of where they are. And so it just felt weird and off-putting that we just never got a sense of where these monsters were until the end of the episode. And also, while the makeup on these monsters was really creepy and effective, we saw a lot of them right up front, which kind of like blunted their terrifyingness later on. So I felt like it would have been better if we just didn't really get to see a lot of them at start, and then when the characters go off into their territory and we like hear them all around the ship and the shuttle, that it would be a lot scarier in that time, in that period. But it really just didn't scare me at all, and so these monsters kind of fell a little bit flat on that side of things. So that front half of the episode all kind of worked for me outside of just the way the monsters were shot and the fact that we got to see a lot of the monsters. But then as the episode kept going on further and further, the more I kind of started to check out of it and found that I really wasn't enjoying myself and was really just questioning a lot of the stuff that was going on. Like, for example, if you build a vacation spot, why would you build it on a planet, even if it is Earth? Why would you build it on a planet that has monsters that are going to kill you all in like 5 minutes if they ever break in? I feel like there are millions of planets you could have built this place on that didn't, like, even if it was like a toxic environment, that didn't have like murder death monsters all around. And so that just felt a little bit strange to me. And then just like some weird character choices. Like I thought that the old couple, like the guy who was going to ask her to marry him, I thought that was set up really well. Their first scene together was very sweet, but then it didn't really pay off. Like the guy, I guess, gets kidnapped, and that's the reason for them to go off into rescue him into this monster space. And it felt like it was just a thing that they needed to have happen to make them want to go off in that space. But then they get there and the doctor's like, oh no, this is horrible. These monsters are much too strong for us. And I'm like, well, you're the ones that chose to go out there. And I understand you wanted to save this guy, but having no plan other than we're just going to go in there, it felt kind of dumb and stupid on the character's part. And then also I was just confused by why the old man was alive to begin with. The monsters kidnapped him and he could talk to them, and then he gets killed off screen by the military lady. And I'm just like, why did he live? How was he able to talk to her? And then it just made the old lady kind of annoying, where she's just like screaming, like, oh, we need to save him. And I'm like, he's dead. And this whole situation just feels weird. Also, why are you here in the middle of evil Death Monsterville? There was all these dumb choices and questions and things that just felt like they happened for the plot to occur. Like, I still can get past, like, why was the old man alive and able to talk to her? I don't understand. And then also we got this reveal that Bella is related to the military person, and I thought that that was intriguing, but it didn't really pay off. It just felt weird. We didn't get enough with the military lady, other than, like, she's kind of like, I don't really want to do the thing that I'm paid to do. Beat. And Bella kind of has that connection to her, and it almost could have been fine if Bella wasn't related to her at all, but that her dad died coming to this vacation spot and she had a grudge against it for some reason. And then also I liked the parent and child relationship with Silas. Where it was another intriguing relationship where the dad doesn't know what he's doing and the kid's actually the real engineer, but the dad doesn't really value him, and so the kid just wants to be valued. And then that payoff at the end is just him running away, getting saved by the doctor, and then immediately showing back up and everything's good with his dad. There's a lot of these side characters all have intriguing side stories, but none of them pay off in interesting ways because I think they're just trying to do too many of them. I feel like you could have cut several of these characters and focused on one or two of them and really had a well-developed, intriguing side story here. But as it is, I feel like it's trying to go after Midnight in the episode Midnight with David Tennant, where there's a lot of interesting characters and you kind of get a hint of all of them right away. But unlike Midnight, where the focus wasn't really to build out the story arcs of those characters, they were just interesting characters that made the situation around them happen. In this one, it's like every character had an arc that the writers clearly wanted to complete, and because all of these arcs were happening, none of them ever felt fully resolved in any enlightening way, and then some of them were just there to further plots in a weird, arbitrary way. And so none of that really worked for me. And then you can't talk about this episode now without talking about the environmental message, about how this is Earth, and Earth gets overrun environmental problems and gets basically, destroyed. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I have no problem with very didactic messaging in my fiction. I know that's going to upset a lot of people. It's like, oh, it's the SJW agenda ruining my show. I think that's dumb and silly and stupid. But the environmental, and I think environmental message is an important one to have in a show. But here it just feels really tacked on. It doesn't feel like it really feeds into anything like, oh, this is Earth. And the characters feel really bad at the end that Earth's going to end up this way. And so it was just strange to me. It just didn't feel like it fed naturally in what the episode was trying to say. Like, this was trying to be like a Monster of the Week episode, which is fine. But then you tack on a weird environmental message that just felt very, especially at the end when the doctor's like, we can change the future, felt very on the nose and just beating you over the head with it, to the point where like it cuts from like, be better of humanity, and then cuts to these monsters. And I also was weirded out because I'm like, I thought the monsters were the ones that we were supposed to have sympathy for. Like, yes, they're murdering people, but they were also treated terribly. And we were supposed to realize that they had some form of intelligence at the end there. And that there is a balance to be found. Like, we can create an ecosystem of, like, carbon dioxide and, like, the message just, none of it gelled. Like, I would have been fine if the message had been, like, the monsters found their own balance and environment will always balance out, but we need to try and protect what we can. But it just felt like none of it gelled together. And it just felt like a weird mishmash hodgepodge of ideas that all could have worked really well if you had just whittled it down and focused on one of them. But as it is, just like they threw everything and the kitchen sink into the script, and none of it really gels in any way, shape, or form. And then kind of just beats you over the head with it at the end there. And then kind of weirdly ruins lore too. Like, I know that there's some talk in Doctor Who that timelines can change, but it just always felt weird that the Doctor's like, we can change the future and you can do better by changing things. And it just felt like this isn't a speech the Doctor would give to these characters necessarily. And I'm fine with the Doctor giving grandiose speeches, but usually his speech is like, humans, you, and like talking to the people that are actually there. Whereas like talking to Graham, Yaz, and Ryan, giving this speech doesn't feel like it affects anything. It just feels like it's just yelling at the audience to care about the environment. And again, I'm fine with you doing that, but it felt like it should have been more naturally integrated and felt like it was being said to someone other than just yelling at the audience at the end. This episode also felt like an ode to the book and video game series Metro 2033, which is like a weird tone for Doctor Who. It's not something that I don't think couldn't work, but it just, again, added into like the tons of stuff being referenced and being done in this episode without any real thought to trying to gel them all together. So yeah, a lot of problems with all of that. One thing I will say I did like, to try and end on a positive note, is the Doctor using her psychic ability on these monsters in the middle of this to like learn that they're from Earth, which has me intrigued. I'm really liking that they're leaning a lot more on the Doctor's psychic abilities. I learned from a lot of people in the comments from last episode that Classic Who had a lot more of the Doctor being psychic. And so I'm curious to see that they're kind of fleshing out that part of Doctor Who lore a lot more this season. And I wonder if that's going to tie into some way maybe the Timeless Child, that they're trying to build up this like psychic abilities to like then feed into the overall narrative, or if it's just an intriguing like building out of Doctor Who lore that we really have not really touched upon much in Modern Who. So I really kind of like that, and I would like to see more of the development of the Doctor's psychic powers being utilized in much more intriguing ways going forward. So yeah, I think there's some stuff to really love, especially towards the beginning of this episode. There's a lot of fun to be had. But it ends up just kind of getting lost in the noise of just too much stuff happening towards the latter half of this episode. So, unfortunately, this isn't one of my favorite episodes. But to be fair, that usually happens with the second or third episodes off of a premiere. I don't really ever expect too much of the second or third episodes. It's really kind of a spot to be like, yeah, we'll do a little weird episode, maybe Seed of Fork, maybe a bottle episode sort of thing. But it's not really where they're going to save their big heavy hitters. So if this is the weakest we're going to get the season, which is possible, there are worse things that could happen. I just wish this episode had just been a little bit more cohesive as a whole, especially towards the end. Alright, well, that's my thoughts on Orphan 55, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Give me some, did you agree with my review? Do you disagree with my review? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more of these reviews, or more of my Star Trek reviews, or my discussions of social or political issues through geek culture, please give my channel a subscribe. And if you want to help make these videos even better, or you want to help me pay the bills, or if you want to help me with, I have a surgery coming up in about a month or so that is going to cost me a lot of money. So if you want to help out with any of that in any way, shape, or form, please consider giving to my Patreon or my PayPal. And as always, I hope you live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons, Stefan Schuhart, Michael McGee, Boyd Earl, Law Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Munir Amlani, BBD, and Mari Nekar.